The city of Beirut has always been a paradox of Mediterranean beauty and scarred concrete, a place where the scent of jasmine often mingles with the metallic tang of gunpowder. In the high-stakes world of Middle Eastern intelligence, it is known as the Wild West of the Levant, a playground for spies, a sanctuary for militants, and a graveyard for those who underestimate the reach of the Mossad. It was here, amidst the luxury penthouses of the Rauch district and the fortified basements of the southern suburbs, that a high-ranking general of a foreign-backed militia felt he had finally achieved the ultimate level of security. General Hassan Al-Zamin was not just a military strategist. He was a ghost who moved through the city in armored convoys, surrounded by a ring of iron-willed bodyguards. He never used a smartphone, he never signed his name on digital documents, and he never stayed in the same bedroom for more than 4 hours. He was a man who understood that in the age of electronic warfare, silence is the only way to stay alive. However, Al-Zamin had one fatal weakness, a flaw that the Mossad's psychological profiling unit, known as the Analysts, had been studying for over a decade. The general was obsessed with the semiotics of power. He believed that a leader's authority was not just reflected in his commands, but in the objects he carried. He had a profound, almost pathological obsession with luxury horology. To Al-Zamin, a watch was not a tool to tell time. It was a testament to his status, a trophy of his dominance. He owned a collection of Swiss timepieces that would rival a museum's vault, but he was always searching for the Holy Grail, a piece so rare and so technically complex that it would signify his place at the very top of the regional hierarchy. The Mossad realized that they didn't need to hack his phone or plant a bomb in his car. They simply needed to give him exactly what his ego demanded. If you are fascinated by the intersection of high-end luxury and lethal intelligence operations, you have found your home. Our channel declassifies the most complex missions in history, bringing you the technical details that others fear to reveal. Subscribe now and join an elite community of viewers who look beyond the surface of global events. Hit the notification bell. In this world, information is the only real weapon. The operation, codenamed Chronos Strike, began not with a commando raid, but with a series of quiet, calculated moves in the auction houses of Geneva and the private backrooms of master watchmakers in the Swiss Jura Mountains. The Mossad needed to create a timepiece that was at once a masterpiece of mechanical engineering and a miracle of miniaturized surveillance. It had to be a Frankenwatch, a custom-built Patek Philippe perpetual calendar that looked and felt indistinguishable from a genuine, multi-million-dollar original, but with a dark heart of Israeli technology hidden within its intricate gears. This was the ultimate challenge for the technicians of Unit 81. They had to integrate a high-frequency, low-energy GPS beacon and a passive acoustic sensor into a space no larger than a grain of rice, all while ensuring the watch's mechanical movements remained perfectly accurate. If the watch gained or lost even a second a day, a man like Al-Zamin, who prided himself on precision, would suspect foul play. The engineering of the watch took 14 months of secret labor. The GPS antenna was woven into the very fabric of a leather strap using microscopic silver threads, invisible to the naked eye and even to most standard X-ray scanners. The power source was the most brilliant stroke of genius. The device was kinetic. It didn't need a battery. The very movement of the general's wrist, the kinetic energy used to wind the mechanical watch, also charged the hidden surveillance microcapacitor. As long as Al-Zamin was alive and moving, the Mossad would know exactly where he was down to the centimeter. They wouldn't just be tracking a man, they would be tracking his pulse, his habits, and eventually his location at the exact moment of his downfall. The stage was set. The Mossad had the hook, and it was made of 18-karat gold and sapphire crystal. Now, they just needed to find the right way to put it on the general's wrist without him ever realizing that he was carrying his own death warrant. The creation of the Chronos timepiece was a feat that transcended traditional espionage and entered the realm of high-precision artistry. To the world, the Jura Mountains in Switzerland are the birthplace of horological excellence, a place where time is measured in millimetric gear teeth and hand-polished tourbillons. For the Mossad, however, These mountains provided the perfect fog for their most ambitious hardware hack. The technical division of the Institute, known as Unit 81, did not merely buy a watch. They infiltrated the very soul of Swiss craftsmanship. They established a front company in Neuchâtel, registered as a boutique restoration studio for high-complication vintage pieces. This studio was staffed by agents who were also master watchmakers, men and women who had spent years training in the same schools as the experts at Patek Philippe and Audemars Piguet. They needed this expertise because General Hassan Al-Zamin was no amateur collector. He had an eye for the slightest imperfection. If a single screw head showed signs of being tampered with, or if the resonance of the minute repeater sounded hollow, the entire operation would collapse, and Al-Zamin would vanish deeper into the shadows of Lebanon. The specific model chosen for the operation was a vintage Patek Philippe perpetual calendar, reference 2499, one of the most coveted and recognizable watches in the world. To a man like Al-Zamin, owning a 2499 was not just about luxury. It was about joining an exclusive club of kings, emperors, and billionaires. The Mossad spent months sourcing a legitimate 2499 from a private estate in South America to ensure its serial numbers and provenance were impeccable. Once the watch arrived at the secret facility in Israel, the surgical phase began. The challenge was a nightmare of physics: how to hollow out the solid gold bridges of the movement to accommodate a global positioning transmitter without affecting the watch's weight, balance, or acoustic chime. The engineers utilized laser micromachining techniques usually reserved for satellite components. They replaced a secondary gear in the calendar mechanism with a custom-built lithium-infused capacitor that could store the kinetic energy generated by the general's movements. This was a perpetual bug for a perpetual calendar. While the technical team worked on the hardware, the Caesarea unit was busy crafting the delivery system. They knew Al-Zamin would never buy a watch from an unknown source. He only dealt with a handful of high-end brokers who specialized in discreet acquisitions for powerful men in the Middle East. The Mossad identified a broker based in Nicosia, Cyprus, who had fallen into massive gambling debt. Through a combination of financial pressure and the promise of a clean slate, the broker became the unwitting conduit for the operation. A new legend was born: Pierre Laurent, a prestigious Swiss-French aristocrat and rare watch consultant. Laurent was actually a veteran Mossad operative with a background in international finance and a flawless Parisian accent. His mission was to leak the information to Al-Zamin's inner circle that a legendary, lost reference 2499 had surfaced and was destined for a private, invitation-only auction in a luxury hotel in Monaco. This level of operational detail is rarely seen outside of classified dossiers. We spend hundreds of hours researching the technical mechanics of these missions to bring you the most accurate narrative possible. If you appreciate this commitment to quality, please take a moment to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. Does the idea of a kinetic-powered tracking device sound like science fiction to you? It was the Mossad's reality. Subscribe, and let's keep declassifying history together. The trap was laid with the patience of a spider. The Mossad didn't push the watch toward Al-Zamin. They made him chase it. They seeded rumors in the exclusive cigar lounges of Beirut and the private clubs of Dubai. They ensured that Al-Zamin's most trusted purchasing agent, a man named Omar, received a catalog for the Monaco auction that featured the 2499 on the front cover. The catalog itself was a masterpiece of deception, printed on vintage paper with high-resolution photography that highlighted the watch's unrestored beauty. Al-Zamin, as expected, was hooked. He saw the watch as a symbol of his rising power, a piece of jewelry that would announce his arrival at the highest levels of the regional command. He ordered Omar to secure the watch at any cost. He was prepared to pay 3 times the market value, unaware that the price he would eventually pay would be his own life. The auction, in Monaco, was a meticulously staged theatrical production. The Mossad rented an entire wing of a historic hotel, filling the room with bidders who were actually deep-cover agents and cooperative assets from friendly European services. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and the hushed tones of multi-million-dollar deals. When the lot for the Patek Philippe 2499 was called, Omar, connected Al-Zamin via an encrypted satellite line in Beirut, engaged in a fierce bidding war against a fake bidder representing a fictional Russian oligarch. This wasn't just to extract money. It was to validate the watch's authenticity. If the bidding was too easy, Al-Zamin would suspect it was a setup. The Mossad pushed the price up to $4.2 million before conceding to Omar. In a fortified room in Beirut, General Hassan Al-Zamin toasted his victory with a glass of vintage Iraq, believing he had just won the greatest prize of his life. He had no idea that as Omar placed the watch into a velvet-lined case to fly it back to Lebanon, the kinetic capacitor had already begun to charge. The Chronos was now alive, and it was whispering its location back to a command center in Tel Aviv. When a private jet carrying Omar and the velvet-lined mahogany box touched down at Beirut Rafik Hariri International Airport, the air was thick with the humid, salty breath of the Mediterranean. General Hassan Al-Zamin did not go to the airport himself. He was far too cautious for such a public display. Instead, he waited in his eagle's nest, a triple-reinforced penthouse in the Beirut Reich district, a fortress of glass and steel surrounded by layers of loyal militia fighters. The watch was transported in a 3-car armored convoy, weaving through the chaotic, potholed streets of the Lebanese capital, past the skeletal ruins of the Civil War and the gleaming new shopping malls of the downtown area. Inside the penthouse, Al-Zamin received the box with the reverence of a high priest handling a holy relic. As he strapped the Patek Philippe reference 2499 onto his left wrist, he felt the cool, heavy weight of the 18-karat gold against his skin. He marveled at the sweeping movement of the second hand, a silent, mechanical heartbeat that seemed to synchronize with his own. He was unaware that the moment the watch's rotor began to spin, it triggered a microscopic handshake with a low-Earth orbit satellite passing directly over the Levant. In a windowless facility in central Israel, the screen of the Chronos control room flickered to life. A single, sharp blue appeared on a 3D topographic map of Beirut. To the Mossad analysts, this wasn't just a location. It was a rhythmic signature. Because the hidden bug was powered by the general's kinetic movement, the intensity and frequency of the signal told a story. They could see when he was agitated, his wrist moving rapidly as he gestured during military briefings. They could see when he was sleeping, the signal falling into a steady, low-energy pulse. They could even tell when he was walking through his reinforced bunkers, as the signal's strength fluctuated based on the thickness of the concrete above him. The Mossad had achieved the impossible. They had turned the general's own vanity into a tether that could never be cut. He had spent his entire life avoiding the digital footprint of a cell phone. Yet he was now wearing a broadcasting station that was far more accurate and impossible to detect. The level of psychological manipulation required for this mission is staggering. The Mossad didn't just study maps. They studied the soul of their enemy. If you find this exploration of a human element in espionage compelling, please subscribe to our channel. We are building a library of the world's most sophisticated operations, and your support allows us to maintain this level of depth. Hit the like button to tell the algorithm that high-quality, long-form investigative content matters. For the next 6 months, the Mossad did not act. They practiced a level of patience that defines elite intelligence services. They watched the blue dot move from the luxury villas of the mountain resorts in Beit Mary to the hidden command centers in the Bekaa Valley. They mapped the general's entire life. They knew which cafes he frequented for his secret meetings, which balconies he stood on to smoke his expensive cigars, and exactly which bathroom in his headquarters offered the least amount of structural reinforcement. They were waiting for a golden window, a moment where the general would be isolated from civilian collateral and where his location could be verified with 100% certainty. The watch was so precise that the Mossad could tell which chair Al-Zamin was sitting in at a conference table. They weren't just following him. They were living his life alongside him, a ghostly presence in every room he entered. However, the operation faced a sudden and terrifying complication. During a routine security sweep by Al-Zamin's personal electronics warfare team, Men trained by foreign specialists to detect bugs. A sophisticated spectrum analyzer picked up a faint, anomalous frequency. It was a go signal, a millisecond burst that shouldn't have been there. The general's chief of security, a paranoid and highly competent man named Khalid, became suspicious. He didn't suspect the watch. No one suspects a mechanical masterpiece of being a spy. But he began to suspect that the general's penthouse had been compromised by laser microphone technology or advanced acoustic bugs. He ordered a blackout sweep where every electronic device in the room was removed and every wall was scanned with X-rays. The Mossad team in Tel Aviv watched the signal data in real time. They saw the general's wrist movement become erratic and sharp. He was pacing. They heard the muffled vibrations of the X-ray machines through the watch's passive acoustic sensor. This was the moment of truth. If the X-ray was powerful enough, it might reveal the microscopic silver threads in the leather strap or the slightly anomalous density of the gold bridge. The lead engineer at Unit 81 made a split-second decision. He triggered a deep sleep command via satellite. The hidden capacitor shut down, the transmitter went dark, and the watch returned to being nothing more than a beautiful, expensive piece of Swiss engineering. The security team found nothing. Khalid apologized for his excessive caution, and Al-Zamin, laughing at his subordinate's paranoia, tapped the crystal of his Patek Philippe. "This," he said, "is the only thing in this room that doesn't rely on a battery to be perfect." He had survived the sweep, and in doing so, he became even more convinced of his own invulnerability. He didn't know that 3 days later, once the heat had died down, the Mossad would wake the Chronos back up and the blue dot would reappear, more lethal than ever before. The operation had now entered its terminal phase. The intelligence gathered by the Chronos watch over the preceding months had provided the Mossad with more than just a location. It had provided a pattern of life so predictable that it became a death sentence. By analyzing the kinetic data, the Mossad's AI-driven systems had identified a recurring security dead zone. Every Tuesday at exactly 6:45 p.m., General Hassan Al-Zamin would dismiss his primary security detail for precisely 15 minutes. This was his time for private reflection on the balcony of his mountain retreat in the hills of Mansouri, overlooking the sprawling lights of Beirut. He felt safe there, high above the city, protected by the steep terrain and the belief that no drone could bypass the sophisticated anti-aircraft batteries stationed in the valley below. He didn't realize that the very watch on his wrist was acting as a precision homing beacon, cutting through the electronic noise of the city like a lighthouse in a storm. In Tel Aviv, the war room was a hive of silent, high-stakes activity. The mission was no longer just an intelligence operation. It was a joint strike coordination. Seated at a circular console, a young officer from the Skyrider unit maintained a constant link with an autonomous, high-altitude loitering munition, a Harpy drone, that had been circling in the stratosphere for over 12 hours. The drone was invisible to the general's radar, its carbon fiber frame and silent electric motor making it a ghost in the sky. The strike would not be a massive explosion. That would be too messy and could cause unwanted diplomatic fallout. Instead, it would be a kinetic blade strike, a 9X missile variant designed to eliminate a single individual with zero collateral damage. The missile needed a lock-on coordinate so precise that it could hit a target the size of a dinner plate from 5 miles up. The Patek Philippe reference 2499 was providing that coordinate in real time, pulsing a low-frequency encrypted signal every 3 seconds. We are now approaching the climax of one of the most daring assassinations in modern history. The fusion of ancient Swiss craftsmanship and futuristic warfare is what defines the 21st century battlefield. If you're finding this investigation as gripping as we did while researching it, please ensure you are subscribed. Join our community of 45,000 intelligence enthusiasts who demand depth over clickbait. The date was set for the following Tuesday. As the sun began to dip below the Mediterranean horizon, painting the Lebanese sky in shades of bruised purple and burning orange, General Al-Zamin stepped out onto his balcony. He checked his watch. the gold casing catching the last rays of the dying light. The time was 6:44. He felt a sense of immense satisfaction. The watch was running perfectly, its perpetual calendar correctly displaying the date and the phase of the moon. He adjusted the leather strap, unknowingly tightening the silver thread antenna against his skin, which boosted the signal strength by 20%. In the Tel Aviv command center, the blue dot on the screen turned red. Target confirmed. Lock on solid. The Skyrider officer whispered into his headset. The order was given. Execute. The R-9X missile dropped from his mothership in total silence. It didn't use a rocket motor during its initial descent, falling like a jagged stone to avoid thermal detection. Only in the final 3,000 feet did its guidance fins deploy, adjusting its trajectory based on the pulses coming from Al-Zamin's wrist. On the balcony, the general took a slow pull from his cigar. Looking out at the city he helped control through fear and shadow. He looked down at his watch one last time, admiring the intricate tourbillon. He never heard the sound of the approaching missile. He never saw the 6 long steel blades deploy from the missile's body seconds before impact. The Chronos watch had done its job. It had measured the final second of Hassan Al-Zamin's life with the same Swiss precision it used to measure the hours. In a flash of kinetic energy, the general, the balcony, and the most expensive bug in history were gone. The signal in Tel Aviv simply vanished. Chronos is offline, the monitor reported. The silence that followed was the sound of a mission perfectly executed. The explosion in the hills of Mansouri was not the end of Operation Chronos Strike. It was the birth of a new kind of terror in the world of clandestine warfare. As the dust settled over the ruins of General Hassan Al-Zamin's balcony, the Lebanese internal security forces and the militia's own forensic teams swarmed the site. They expected to find the remnants of a traditional bomb or perhaps the shrapnel of a standard Hellfire missile. What they found instead was a surgical scene of devastation that defied their understanding of ballistics. There was no large crater, no scorch marks from high explosives. Instead, they found deep, clean lacerations in the concrete and the shattered remains of a man who had been targeted with the precision of a laser. But the most significant piece of evidence, the piece that would haunt intelligence circles for years, was the only thing that had survived the kinetic impact relatively intact, a twisted, blackened piece of an 18-karat gold watch case, still attached to a fragment of a leather strap. The investigation that followed was a descent into paranoia for every high-ranking official in the Middle East. When the serial numbers on that gold fragment were traced back to the original Patek Philippe auction in Monaco, the realization hit like a second missile. The general hadn't been tracked through his security detail, his vehicles, or his communications. He had been tracked through his soul's greatest desire. The Mossad had not broken into his house. They had been invited in, strapped to his wrist, and polished every morning by his own hand. The Chronos operation shattered the illusion of safety that high-end luxury items provided. Suddenly, every Rolex, every custom-made Italian suit, and every pair of designer sunglasses owned by the regional elite became a potential Trojan horse. The market for vintage luxury watches in Beirut, Damascus, and Tehran collapsed overnight. Generals and ministers began wearing cheap, plastic digital watches, terrified that the gears of a Swiss masterpiece were actually the teeth of an Israeli trap. We have reached the conclusion of a journey that spans from the quiet workshops of the Jura Mountains to the blood-stained balconies of Beirut. Operation Chronos Strike remains one of the most sophisticated examples of social engineering meets high-tech espionage. If you have stayed with us until this final second, you are the reason we produce this content. You seek the truth that lies beneath the gears of history. Please subscribe to the channel, leave a final comment about which part of this mission shocked you the most, and share this video with those who deserve to know how the world really works. Your support is our greatest asset. Thank you for watching. Back in Tel Aviv, the mood was one of somber professional satisfaction. There were no celebrations, only the meticulous closing of files. The agents who played the roles of Pierre Laurent and the Swiss watchmakers vanished back into the anonymity of the Israeli civilian population. The front company in Neuchâtel was dissolved, its records erased, and the studio space leased to a legitimate bakery. Unit 81 began analyzing the data harvested by the watch during its 6 months on the general's wrist. The information was a goldmine. The acoustic sensor had captured months of private conversations, tactical plans, and the names of foreign suppliers that Al-Zamin thought were safe within the soundproof walls of his penthouse. The Chronos had not just killed a man. It had mapped an entire network of shadow warfare that would take the Mossad another decade to dismantle. The legacy of the Patek Philippe reference 2499 operation is now taught in the world's most elite intelligence academies as the gold standard of patient infiltration. It proved that in the 21st century, the most effective way to kill an enemy is not to hunt him, but to become a part of his identity. The operation redefined the concept of the bug. It was no longer a device hidden under a table or inside a lamp. It was a kinetic, self-powering, sentient object that utilized the target's own life energy to fuel his destruction. Hassan Al-Zamin spent his life obsessing over time, never realizing that the very machine he used to measure his days was the one counting down his final seconds. As we close this declassified file, remember that the world of shadows is always evolving. The technology described here is already being replaced by even more invisible methods: biometric tracking, neural link sabotage, and the weaponization of the very air we breathe. But the core principle of the Mossad remains the same. By way of deception, thou shalt do war. In the city of Beirut, where the sun still sets in shades of orange and purple over the Mediterranean, the story of the general and his watch has become a ghost story whispered in the halls of power. It is a reminder that in the game of shadows, the most beautiful things are often the most lethal, and that sometimes the most expensive gift you will ever receive is the one that costs you everything. This has been a declassified investigation into the watch that stopped time. We will see you in the next shadow. The story of the Patek Philippe reference 2499 is more than a tale of assassination. It is a cold lesson in the new reality of global security. It demonstrates that the traditional walls of concrete, steel, and armed guards are obsolete in the face of lifestyle infiltration. The Mossad didn't just exploit a security gap. They created a psychological mirror, reflecting the target's own ego back at him until it became his executioner. This operation, Chronos Strike, serves as a definitive warning to those who believe that wealth and isolation can provide sanctuary. In the modern age, the objects we love, the brands we trust, and the luxuries we display are the very windows through which the shadows can enter. As we conclude this investigation, one question remains: how many other masterpieces are currently ticking on the wrists of the world's most powerful figures? How many luxury cars, encrypted phones, or designer homes are actually silent sentinels, waiting for a signal from a satellite thousands of miles away? The tragedy of General Hassan Al-Zamin was not that he was caught, but that he was defeated by the very thing he cherished most. He died admiring the time, unaware that time had already run out. The file on Beirut's luxury watch is now closed, but the war of shadows continues, evolving with every heartbeat and every second that passes. We are living in an era where the most dangerous weapon in the world isn't a bomb. It's the truth you never see coming. Stay vigilant, stay informed, and never trust the silence.